Well, welcome back. Welcome back to Democracy or Empire. Here we are in Manchester, New Hampshire, presidential season, presidential activity all over the state, including in Manchester. And we're trying to focus on this very important question that the great analyst and conservative Chalmers Johnson poses for us. Will we choose to be a democracy or will we choose to be an empire? And remember, what he says is we can't be both. Yes, we have to choose one or the other. So today we were going to be doing the cost of defense in our series on democracy or empire. But we've had to make some changes, and I'll explain a little bit later about that. But what we can bring you is people from New Hampshire asking questions as we polled them, in videos in the street, and answers that we're getting from some of the presidential candidates. So we're going behind the scenes in today's program. And first, we have a clip in downtown Manchester of somebody that wants to ask this question of all the presidential candidates.
I'd like to know why the military doesn't tally up the amount of civilian dead in foreign lands.
And if you could pose a question to the president regarding the wars, what do you think you would say?
Well, that would be the question, because that's the main question I've had on all wars. Why not report the civilian deaths? I know it's not popular, but it gives the populace a full view of what's really going on, and it brings it right down to life and death.
And so, if it's so important that as a last alternative, this country has to go to war, shouldn't we count civilian deaths? Don't we know that war always involves the weak and the vulnerable being chewed up in the gears of war, that women, children will be killed, collateral damage, however you want to explain it or characterize it, that there will be these deaths, and that we need to know, as part of the cost of war, as part of this terrible decision, what these effects are. Yes, and so we want to know from these presidential candidates, when they're president, will they make sure that these deaths are counted? And Governor Roemer over at St. Anselm's earlier this week responded to this question.
Nothing more for me to do. We have a question for Governor Roemer. When you're president, sir, will you insist that when the United States goes to war or there's a military action and there's a possibility of civilian deaths, that you will make sure that this nation accounts for those civilian deaths and casualties and accurately reports them on a regular basis?
Absolutely, and the full accounting of the budget, of the tax code, and of the war cost must be had in America. We must become more transparent, more full disclosure. Civilian deaths are like military deaths. They're irreplaceable. They must be counted.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Great job, Governor.
See ya.
There was a little glitch there between his lips and the sound, but I think if you read his lips, you'll know that the sound you were hearing was Governor Roemer, and it was accurate. And this, I was there. This is actually what he was saying. Full disclosure that this is important. This is who America is. Honest, straightforward, and we're going to level with people, our own citizens and people around the world. So that he's not the only person responding. We've had some responses where I've had to go back to those candidates because there are just too many weasel words. And if it was too weaselly, we're not going to share that. We have a revamped website, democracyOrEmpire.org, O-R-G. So if you go to that, we're going to be posting these clips from like Governor Roemer and other presidential candidates there, as well as the responses we get through the email, so that you, the citizens who have these questions, like that man in Manchester, can hear what these candidates are saying and make your own judgments about whether you like those answers or not. So Governor Roemer's running on the Republican ticket here in New Hampshire, and we have another candidate who's running on the Democratic ticket. Now, this is a person that you haven't seen in debates, but you'll find remarkably, if you listen to him, a number of the people that aren't in the hit parade have some excellent ideas and sound ideas. And this man is a physicist, Dr. Greene, and he's running because he has an energy idea that he thinks is terrific. And he wants to share this with his fellow citizens and get them to think about it and respond to it. But he answered this question: if you're president, will you account for civilian deaths when you go to war or have military conflicts? Here's Dr. Greene's answer.
To the extent possible, I think that we should enumerate all the casualties of war, both on our side and the other side, and present those to the public. I don't see any good reason for keeping that sort of information secret. I think that we owe it to the American public to know exactly what we're doing, seeing that we're committing, the lives of our young men and women in battle.
And so he says, to the extent possible. And after that little clip and interview, I asked him, is this a weasel word? He said, no, sometimes you don't know what those numbers are, but we would look for those and we would make sure that to the best of our ability, we're accounting for those. So that little beginning phrase of his, to the extent possible, is not an attempt to say, well, we're really not going to report them, or we're really not going to report them accurately, as I understand Dr. Greene. So we have others, and we're going to be sharing these both on our website, and we invite people that are taking these clips to share them with us and their fellow citizens, because we're going to put them up. And so we have some wonderful rewards if you do this and we're able to air them or put them on our website. You're going to be well fed. Yes. And you're going to be well fed at two places, the Manchester Diner and also Consuelo's, both in Manchester. Terrific. If it's an audio response that you're getting, then for a $7.50 lunch, we're going to buy your lunch for you. So send information that you have, or contact us through our internet site, or our email, which is democracyOrEmpire@gmail.com. But actually, there were two good questioners of Governor Perry. Our guests last week, yes, they're showing us how to ask questions when presidential candidates come through. Governor Perry, this last Tuesday, was on over at St. Anselm's, and both Coleen Rowley and Ray McGovern asked him questions. Seem to be tough questions, but I want to show you what their reward is, and we'll do a clip of Consuelo's later on. If you ask and videotape the question, and we can use that, then you get a dinner worth $15. So here's Coleen and Ray McGovern at that wonderful, delicious restaurant, Virginia's Home Cooking, right here on Hanover Street in downtown Manchester, the Manchester Diner. At the Manchester Diner, and these two people asked a great question of a presidential candidate, and they're going to have a lunch on Democracy or Empire with Virginia. All right, great cooking. Enjoy your lunch, people. Hanover and Chestnut. What are you asking for here?
What would you like?
I'd order the broccoli cheddar soup.
Yes, the broccoli cheddar soup.
Wow, hard choice.
Looks good.
All right.
I'd have the homemade chili.
Okay.
Oh, big time. Yeah. And still have $2.50 left over.
All right, great. Okay, good.
That's great. Well, thank you, Virginia. We're going to be sending some good people in here that are stepping up like these two good people.
All right.
So, we have now a behind-the-scenes look, which is rare. Haven't you always wondered what happens in the Oval Office when the CIA briefer, the Central Intelligence Agency briefer, the person that works for the CIA, comes to the White House and tells the president, Mr. President, this is what you need to know about what is happening in the world, or this crisis is unfolding, here's our best intelligence, here's our best information. So we have this. We did this with Governor Roemer over at St. Anselm's, and this will be shown subsequently, but we were able to produce another one of these with Dr. Greene down in Westford, Massachusetts, just over the border, and we're going to share that with you now. And so Dr. Greene, who wants to be president, who's running for president, he's on the ballot, is going to be the president for this showing of what happens behind the scenes in the Oval Office. And Ray McGovern, our guest this last week, he's going to be the CIA briefer. Now, this should be pretty easy for Mr. McGovern because he's briefed 3 actual presidents. And so he is going to be briefing as if he's still working for the CIA and as if Dr. Greene is the actual president on Iran, this important and contemporary and newsworthy item. And Coleen Rowley, the senior FBI agent who we saw last Monday talking about the cost of intelligence, we will see her not in a role in Minneapolis counsel to the FBI, but we will see her in the role as director. We're promoting Coleen as director of the FBI, because sometimes the foreign intelligence reports have to be amended, have to be added. There has to be added perspective on what could happen domestically from this international incident. So sit back, and we're about to see the lid peek a little bit about what happens in the Oval Office when there is a crisis. And so here we go. Hello, I'm Ed Helm, and I'm the producer of a series, Democracy or Empire. And I'm produced today a wonderful piece of that, a behind-the-scenes look into the Oval Office. Yes, it's presidential season. We're selecting the next president of the United States. And so we want to know who's going to be in that Oval Office and what kind of information and briefing they get when there's a crisis. And we have that for you today. In fact, we have a former Westford man, a Dr. Bob Greene, who is running for president, yes, a Westford man running for president. He's on the ballot in New Hampshire. He's here today to act as the president would act in that Oval Office when the CIA briefer comes before him and tells him about a crisis in Iran that he's going to have to deal with. And the CIA briefer is a real CIA briefer, a retired briefer of 3 presidents from the Central Intelligence Agency, a senior officer named Ray McGovern. And with him is a senior person from the FBI, a special agent in Minneapolis named Coleen Rowley. And she's going to pretend to be the director of the FBI. So that's our show for you today, and let's peek into the Oval Office during a crisis time with a former Westford man, Dr. Bob Greene.
Welcome to a simulated briefing of the President of the United States on the basis of the President's daily brief, a process that happens 6 times a week. What we're going to try to do here is to make things as realistic as possible. I can contribute to this because I can extrapolate from my own experience in doing precisely this job as a senior CIA intelligence officer. Usually we did it about 7:30 in the morning, and it was in the Oval Office. And That's the only thing that's can't quite be made very realistic here. This looks nothing like the Oval Office, but we're going to ask you to use your imaginations. This is, for this morning, the Oval Office. To my left is a candidate for president on the Democratic ballot in New Hampshire, the primary, and his name is Bob Greene, and it's got an E on the end of it. And Bob will be simulating the presidency of the United States. To his left is Coleen Rowley, a senior FBI official, now retired, who will be impersonating Bob Mueller, the head of the FBI. And I will be impersonating what I used to do, namely the briefer from the CIA, briefing the president. And I will have behind me the Director of National Intelligence listening in, which is something we didn't experience when I was doing the job, but now he is head of this whole process, and he is usually here. So without further ado, I would like to stop the simulation here and start the real deal, as though this was a real briefing on November 30th, 2011, of the President of the United States, in this case, Bob Greene.
Agent McGovern, good morning.
Morning, Mr. President.
What do you got for me today?
Well, I apologize for my attire. Things are happening very quickly. I had to leave without my jacket, and on the way down here...
Let's get right into it.
Okay, I have a briefing from the Operations Center having to do with Iran.
Okay.
As you may have heard, yesterday, Iranian students and others stormed the British embassy and another British outpost. This was something that didn't seem to be requested or ordered by the Iranian government.
The embassy obviously is in Tehran.
That's correct.
Okay, and the outpost was where?
Also in Tehran, but at a different site.
Okay.
Now, they didn't get anywhere near the entrails of these establishments, but they did scare folks, and to the point where the British in London have expelled all Iranian diplomats today and given them 48 hours to leave, together with their staffs. So, bottom line here, tensions with Iran are escalating still more.
What do we hear from British intelligence?
British intelligence is really just following the orders of the government by by insisting that the Iranians all leave London. Now, the problem is here that we don't quite know who is behind these attacks on the embassy and the other installation. We are reasonably certain that the Iranian government was not orchestrating this. Among other things, they apologized immediately and asked for understanding. Now, who is behind these attacks? Well, in the intelligence business, we usually go to the cui bono explanation, who's going to profit from this. Foreign intelligence agency could be involved in this, and the likely candidate would be that of Israel. Why? Well, because Israel has been stoking the fires of a campaign against Iran, has been actually distorting the report from the IAEA, the UN inspector corps that inspects the sites in Iran. And the rhetoric has become very, very dangerous, very, very much reminiscent of 2002 before the attack on Iraq.
We had no briefing at all from the Israelis, is that correct?
The Israelis are in town, and they're talking to the Pentagon, but we have not talked to them exactly yet. It's not likely that they would admit to any role in this kind of thing.
Why would, I assume that we've looked at forces inside of Iran, and who would be a likely candidate to initiate such an action?
Well, there are people crawling all over Tehran. We witnessed the assassination of Iranian scientists and this kind of thing. Most people believe Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, is behind a lot of this, and I dare say there are other friendly intelligence agencies like the British who are also involved. So what's murky, and what we can't tell you today, but we'll be able to tell you tomorrow or later today if you wish, is who really was behind all this, and whether this is yet another ratcheting up of the tension to allow or to give a pretext for the Israelis to attack Iran.
Well, okay, it seems to me at this stage you're a little quick to sort of pin this on the Israelis. Okay, what I would like to know is there are plenty of forces inside of Iran. Okay, they have a variety of military organizations, some that operate directly under the command of the mullahs. Why do we think that they are not responsible for this attack on the British Embassy?
Well, because they would have no interest in stirring up that kind of invective or
Except that we know that they have executed other operations that did stir up tension.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been kidnappings, there's been, cross-border incidents, there's been incidents in the Gulf. So, why would we give them a clean bill of health in this case?
Well, I'm not giving them a clean bill of health. I'm saying that they have no realistic interest in stirring up this kind of trouble. And I also have to say, with all due respect, that Western intelligence agencies are expert at stirring up this kind of trouble. And if one looks at who would profit from this, it would be those who wish to escalate tensions with Iran, and those are the Israelis.
If you had to choose an analogy of this case versus some other in the past, what would you choose?
Well, I would say when Iran was prepared to give up 2/3 of its low-enriched uranium, shocked the whole world by saying that even the New York Times said, if this is real, this is the end of the threat from Iran. Within a month, a terrorist organization called Jundallah, who has been supported by the United States, Israel, and other Western intelligence agencies, killed 5 senior Revolutionary Guards generals in Iran. The day before, the Iranians were to go to Vienna to negotiate this willingness to give 2/3 of their low-enriched uranium to Russia or Turkey, someplace to reprocess it so they could feed their medical reactor. So there's a direct parallel there. There are forces within the people who want to bring down the Iranian government that don't want any real agreement with Iran, would rather attack them and obliterate what nuclear potential they do have.
Do we hear anything else from other nations in the Middle East regarding this incident?
Not just now, although there have been several Arab nations and other nations quizzing us on why the propaganda offensive seems to be stoked, not only by the leaders in Israel, but also by people in this country who are very sympathetic to them, to play up the International Atomic Energy Report into something that it's not. What the International Atomic Energy Agency has reported is exactly what we, the intelligence community, in 2007 reported, and that was this. You may recall that after a year of a bottom-up assessment on all the evidence on the Iranian nuclear program, we were concluding with high confidence, as we put it, all 16 agencies unanimously, that Iran stopped working on a nuclear weapon at the end of 2003 and had not renewed that work. Now,
What was the basis of that conclusion? Was this people on the ground? What sort of resources were involved in coming to this conclusion?
Well, as you know, when we spend a whole year on these things, we pick all the pieces together, the UN reporting and everything else, but more important, the intelligence reporting. And my point simply is that the IAEA report released just last week affirms that and says, yes, they were working on a nuclear weapon before 2003, and they stopped at the end of 2003. What else does it say? It says, well, there's some indication that some nuclear-related activity that could possibly be related to a weapon development program. We've noticed that too. But the uranium itself, the low-enriched uranium, which would have to be refined to a much higher degree, as you know, to allow it to...
But on the other hand, we have all sorts of reports from the media, which essentially were backed by import-export data that said that Iran has been importing many centrifuges, and and they are quick to come to the conclusion that indeed they are doing more enrichment.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
And so who profits from that sort of story if it's not true?
Well, the same kind of people who wanted to start a war with Iraq. You remember the aluminum tubes?
Yes, I do.
Okay. You remember the yellow cake uranium
Yes, I do.
from Africa? Well, those were cockamamie reports that were used to justify an unjustifiable attack on Iraq. That's what we're seeing now here. Those kinds of the people that are going to...
No offense, Agent McGovern, that was bad intelligence. Okay, and
It was
so
a forgery, sir. It was a forgery.
Okay, whatever you want to call it. How do we know that we're not experiencing some of that in the other direction this time?
Because the IAEA has affirmed our conclusion that Iran stopped working on a nuclear weapon in the fall of 2003.
What have they been doing with respect to inspectors?
The inspectors have free rein in Iraq. The inspectors are crawling over every crevice in Iraq, and that's the important point, because the inspectors have verified that not 1 ounce of the uranium, the low-enriched uranium, has been diverted into purifying it to the point where it could be used for a nuclear weapon. This is the consistent conclusion of every IAEA report, including this one. So, with all due respect, what you're seeing in the press is a distortion of the real situation. That's why I think it's important for you to know that.
Okay, and they are not they're not generating plutonium at this stage?
No, just uranium.
Okay.
But you know, when people say, well, why would Iran need uranium? I mean, for Pete's sake, they got all the oil, they got like gas and all that stuff. Well, I remind people that back in 1976, when Rumsfeld and Cheney were working in the White House for Jerry Ford, they persuaded him to give a full cycle development thing to the Shah, okay? Westinghouse GE was going to make $8 billion on this thing, okay? So it's the same sort of thing. Why? Because they need the energy. They like to sell the oil. They don't like to use up the oil, and they know that the oil's going to run out eventually.
Right.
So now, it may not be the smartest thing. I mean, I'm not an expert on nuclear power, but it gives me the willies to know that an important country like Iran is going to turn to nuclear power plants.
Well,
you may have some
unfortunately, you know, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty does allow countries to generate nuclear power and set up their own nuclear power plants with the help and inspection of the you know, International Atomic Energy Organization, agency. So, well, I guess I want to hear more.
Yeah.
But I think we have to stay on top of this. I would like to hear more about our intelligence on this subject. Okay, you know, how is it generated? You know, who can we reach out to get even better information? You know, who has the resources there in Tehran that might know something about this group that actually made the assault? Okay. Sure. I'd just like to take a second now and go to Director Rowley and ask, what are the implications here in the United States of the events that are taking place in Europe?
Well,
and
I
the
can
Far East?
assure you in response to your last question that we also have human intelligence sources here in the United States that have contacts back in Iran. So we have taken a rather unprecedented step and sent an all special agent in charge memo out to have all of our informants and assets contacted and asked and actually queried as to what they might know about this protest event yesterday at the British Embassy. So we're doing that. We are also tasking, and again, we are concerned that this could escalate. You may or may not know this, but in the lead up to Iran, the FBI queried all of its intelligence base this way, Iraqi intelligence base then at the time, to see what threats might be posed domestically. So we have a core group of 100 analysts that are sifting through the various intelligence reports on Iranian threats. That actually includes a little broader to Hamas and Hezbollah because there are liaisons there. So we started that process already. We are also, of course, querying all of the other domestic intelligence gatherers in the United States, and of course the national, the director of Central Intelligence will receive all of those. But I was just here to tell you that we are taking this very seriously because there is a strong chance that these events, maybe not just solely, but they are going to lead perhaps to an attack. And if an attack occurs, what will happen then, logically, there will be blowback, and there could even be lone wolf sources. Our intelligence is, of course, very vast now, but I can't quite assure you that we would not get some kind of domestic attack from an Iranian source.
But at this point, you're still in the intelligence gathering phase, and you don't have any real information.
We just started this morning because
Yeah.
the event just happened, and this has really caused us really concerned that we'll see something, and that's why we've taken this step. We only took this step a couple of times, one when we were on the verge of starting the invasion of Iraq, and we also took this step during the summer of 2004 during the pre-election threat, and that turned out to be admittedly a hoax, actually. Tom Ridge has admitted that that was a false alert, but we did query at that time all human intelligence for what threats were posed to the 2004 election. And we are doing very similarly. I just want you to know that
we appreciate your efforts on that. I'd like to pose a different question. I've got a program that's in the works that I'm working on with the Department of Energy. Okay, and that's to sort of change the playing field with respect to energy. And this is, classified as at this point, but I think we have to start to introduce the subject with our allies and sort of get an assessment of what this is going to do to our viewpoint on energy and our strategic alternatives with respect to it. The program, I'll tell you about it, is based on thorium. Thorium is an element 2 below uranium in the atomic chart. It is naturally not radioactive. 99.99% of it in the Earth's crust is not radioactive at all, and it's a single isotope. Because it's a single isotope, it's much simpler. It's much safer, and we don't have the same problems with safety that we have with existing nuclear waste. Reactors that use thorium can also burn our existing supplies of radioactive waste and plutonium waste. Wow. So there's a tremendous advantage here. In terms of quantity, something like 15 to 19% of the thorium exists in the United States, so it's domestically sourced. It's 4 times more prevalent than uranium. It's more common in the Earth's crust than gold, silver, mercury, tin, tungsten.
Wow.
You can name it. Okay, so this is a tremendous opportunity for us. We have the ability to make a assembly line process for making new reactors. Okay, with this, we could change the landscape of energy. We could significantly reduce the amount of oil that we consume and bring in, particularly if we had a big program on electric cars, which I'm also pushing. So what this is going to do is going to make oil less important. Also, it will redefine what nuclear reactors are all about. And so this is a much safer scenario. As I say, we used to have a program back in the 60s to develop this. We had a working reactor at Oak Ridge National Laboratories. And because of political shenanigans of the day and the fact that you couldn't make bombs out of it, it got de-emphasized. Okay, but now we're coming back and asking the question that we should ask. What is the best way for us to provide power in the future? Now, so what I'm really asking here is how is this going to change the landscape? Our State Department people say one thing, but I'd also like to hear, I know this isn't what intelligence normally does, but I think it's an important question to ask everybody.
Well, I could say from the intelligence point of view that nothing immediate would change. During the course of your first term, you could expect pretty much inertia to bring these things forward. But over the long term, when you think of the national security aspects of this and the lessening of the danger of explosions and so forth, I just wish you well in working with the Department of the Energy. It would solve a lot of our problems as well. We are just as a bottom line here, we are very concerned that the current president's advisories to the Israeli prime minister, please don't build any more settlements, please don't do this. It doesn't seem as though Netanyahu is taking